Hello everybody, Adrian Plass here,
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
and welcome to number 228 in Sounding the Shallows. So, well, I was thinking, we often say what is the highlight of this week, and a number of things have happened this week, but one thing that has happened is that our grandson, who is 3 years old, well, 3.5 years old, was taken to look at a possible first proper school. He's at nursery school at the moment, so next year he'll be going to school. And it did set me thinking about my early days at school, and one shining memory emerges.
Well, you do. I think everybody remembers the best and the worst when you think back to memories of school.
Well, the worst. All right, we'll start with the worst. The worst was not knowing where the boys went to the toilet. I found where they urinated, but I didn't know where they did anything else.
Okay.
So I was in a considerable state of embarrassed confusion for a while. However, this was mitigated, if that's the word, by the presence of the best, which was Miss Oliver.
Oh, come on. Tell us about Miss Oliver.
Well, I remember her as a beautiful, dark-haired, absolutely charming, lovely person who looked after me. That's what I remember of her.
And you were, what, 5?
About 5, yeah. And I think she was the first person I ever actually fell in love with, really. And I still have a small matchbox, which I wrapped in paper and stuck paper on it or something. And I've still got this thing, which means it's 71 years ago that I made that.
What is it? You made it in
just
Miss Oliver's class.
I made in Miss Oliver's class, yeah.
I have seen this.
And I wanted to hang on to it so that I would never forget her. So that was really good. But after that, things got a bit complicated. And a lot of it depended on which teacher you were with. I do remember that. In fact, I couldn't tell you the name of the teacher after Miss Oliver. But one of the things that happened was that I started to really love reading. I was reading before I went to school.
Yeah.
And when I got into school, there was one horrendous moment when, just not at all horrendous, but it shows what happens in 5-year-olds' minds, that I had a book that was my book, that every child had a book they were in the middle of reading.
Yeah.
And you would take your book up to the teacher at the desk.
Yeah.
And you would read some of it, and she would say, well done, or, we need to do some more work, or whatever. So I took my book up, and she opened it up on the desk. And I twisted round it and looked at it and started to read. And she said, "This is the wrong book for you." And I took it as a criticism or some problem I had. And in fact, she was saying, your reading is way beyond this book, and you should be reading more difficult books.
So something scary and horrid turned into something A may sing.
Well, not immediately, no. I didn't understand for a while. I mean, don't forget that I was only just getting over the toilet problem. Yes. And since then, I would say I have always got into the same type of problem where I think radically but not constructively about something that's happened.
And you don't think to ask? No, you would think to ask.
I don't ask. Yeah. Anyway, what about you? Did you have some first teachers who enthralled you?
To be honest, I don't remember it like that. But it doesn't really matter. What I do remember is realising much later, when our children were at school, that it didn't matter what type of teacher it was, so long as they were authentic. Now, what I mean by that is, I remember we were at an infant sports day, and there were 2 reception teachers at our children's school. And one of them wore long, flowy skirts and was very warm, very kind. And the other one was a very good teacher as well, but totally different, quite upright, quite firm. And I'd always thought that the one with the long, flowing skirts, who was very kind, that they children must like her lots more than the other one. But I don't know if you remember, but there was an extraordinary moment. The one with the long flowing skirts got up, and the children kind of went after her like the Pied Piper, all holding on to her skirts and chattering away. And I thought, yes, that's exactly how it should be. And then the other teacher got up, and I realised how excited those children were as well, because they were marched, and they enjoyed marching, and they marched really well. And it was equally fun. And it taught me something that maybe I hadn't understood at school, and certainly at secondary school, that people could be completely different and still, if they're authentic and they have something interesting to do, children will love being with them.
Did you think like that then? Or was
No,
it you mean on reflection?
I didn't. I'm saying on reflection. I'm really saying seeing it through my children's eyes. No, my memories at school are a little bit hazy, really. I seem to remember just doing never-ending lines and lines and lines of writing. It was quite a strict school, actually. It was a very old-fashioned school. And it was not a very creative school. So I'm afraid that my memories are all tangled up with smells of powdered ink and polished, grainy desks, and a lot of fear, because I was quite frightened of quite a few of my teachers. So, no, and then maybe around 11 when I got a part in the school play, a very good part, and suddenly school became a bit shinier. But
Can you remember what the part was?
I can. All right, I can. It was a musical, and I was Prince She Magine. And I was only the prince because I was taller than the person who got to be the princess, but it did mean I sang a song. And I think something lit in me that I wanted to do something like this again. But that was one of the highlights. There were quite a lot that weren't really.
What do you mean? Because later you wanted to act, so that was the beginning of that.
I don't know, Adrian. I certainly just knew I loved having words that could be turned around in my mouth and come out how I wanted to say them, I suppose. I don't know. But I mean, I think that was inspiring for me, and it took away some of the fear. I was in a play at school, in the early secondary school, in the first year, I think, and it was a play which I think, it's a musical, I think, and I think it was called, and I would love to, if anyone knows the real title, I think it was called Midas Has Got Ass's Ears. Oh,
wow. One of the main songs was Midas Has Got Ass's Ears. I can't remember the exact tune. But
it
was about Midas.
Having asses.
It was a funny musical.
Yeah.
And I was a girl. I was dressed as a girl and made up as a girl. And I remember being somewhat confused by that. I mean, nowadays, of course, nobody's confused by that, are they?
Can I just point out, it was an all-boys school,
it was
wasn't
an all-boys
it? Like my
school,
brother in Midsummer Night's Dream had to say an I, mustard seed, and come on like a fairy, which his younger sister, i.e. me, found screamingly funny. Yes.
Well, I don't remember it too well, and it didn't inspire me to be an actor, although later on that's also what I wanted, of course. But I do remember my first English teacher.
Oh, yeah.
I was in 1A to start with.
This is secondary school.
This is at grammar school.
Oh, grammar school.
Where you, in the first year, because nobody knew whether you were thick or worthy, you would only have a colour for your class. So you'd be 1A, one blue, one red, one green. Maybe they corresponded. No, anyway. So there was an English teacher, and he was. I don't know why he inspired me so much. One or two things I can remember. I remember that I did there was a handwriting competition, some ploy of his.
You're not going to tell me you won a handwriting competition.
Well, I'm going to tell you that despite having some of the worst handwriting in the world, when they had the handwriting competition, he gave somebody 10 out of 10.
Yes.
When I handed in my handwriting entry,
yes,
I got 11 out of 10.
You sure it wasn't
No, it was
10?
11 out of 10.
Okay.
And I thought it was a little odd, but I remember feeling, this is great, I could succeed. I really do remember that.
Yeah.
But and then stupid things, like at home, in a bookcase, we had a book which was it was Alexander Pope's translation of the Iliad. Right. Now I'm 11, right, or 12 or something. And the teacher used to, as a punishment, give out, people had to write something called, I can't remember what it was he said, Isles of Greece. That's it. He'd say, Isles of Greece, they know they had to write a paragraph about because they'd been naughty. And I said to him, could I do Alexander Pope's translation of the...
God, you were annoying.
the
Iliad.
Yeah. So he said, what?
I'm not surprised.
I said, Alexander Pope's translation of the Iliad. He said, what could you possibly know about how would you even know there was an Alexander Pope? I said, I just one at home, I suppose. I just got... And so
that sounds like a need to
kind of
score points to try and level
I
yourself,
suppose so, yeah.
really. Yeah,
But
I don't
then,
think... Yeah,
then,
come
talking
on,
about
then.
acting.
Yes, come on.
We read some Shakespeare in one of the classes with him. And I read a bit of Shakespeare. And he was reading a part as well, and he put his book down and he looked at me where I stood in the classroom, and he said, I don't think I could have read that any better myself.
Well, these are amazing memories,
No,
because
I
I know
know.
school wasn't great for
Wasn't
you at
at
all,
all,
was
no.
it? But
But
these
but
are
those
shiny
things,
moments. Yes.
They were. They lifted me in a way that really, it's very
Yeah.
sustaining, even over a long period.
You see, I think the difference between a lot of education then, and we are talking about a long time ago, and now is what we can't stand in Christian teaching as well, because it seemed designed to praise you if you got things meticulously right in a particular way, and everything was designed for success, written on the dotted line, wasn't it? Yeah. So if you were struggling, you sat at the back of the class, which is extraordinary thinking about it. If you'd done well, you sat at the front of the class. Now that is just one small thing that I look at it and I think, how could that be?
What
but
would
it
the
definitely
philosophy
was.
be behind that?
I don't know. I suppose that the people at the back weren't worth bothering about so
Really?
much.
Do you think people
I
really
don't
thought
know,
that?
because
Yeah.
I don't know, but I do think that it's that type of tick box teaching that is the worst of Christian teaching. And we saw something. Somebody suggested this to us, that we looked at. Now I don't. Oh, blimey! I hope you remember his full name, but it's Rabbi Salman, and then it's a very long name.
No, I know exactly who you're talking about, but the name is
Well,
gone.
anyway,
He's very well known.
He's very well known, but except his surname. But he was talking about
23rd Psalm.
23rd Psalm.
Yeah.
And there was something about the way that he spoke about it, which was like all of the best teaching, because it just opened you up. And there were in this clip, and you can find it on YouTube, "The Lord's My Shepherd," and it's Rabbi Salman, and whatever. But he's got two clearly middle-aged scholars with him who are listening to him as though they're small children.
That's right, yeah.
That opening up, that stretching out of ideas, so that you can enter into that idea.
I was trying to work out what it was that was so appealing about him. One thing was his voice. He has a very authoritative,
But
very
kind.
strong voice with a sort of, not even exactly kind, but engaging with you and your mind, and saying things about the content of that psalm, and actually quoting the Hebrew, which was just meaningless to
lovely.
me.
But and the Latin.
I just loved hearing it.
Yes.
And every now and then he would say something about one part of one line, and you would realize that you had never actually ever fully understood it before. And I could have sat and listened to him, I think, forever and ever and ever.
I mean, I do think, we're always talking about the storyteller Jesus, but they sat and listened for hours. Now, I know that there won't have been necessarily a lot of entertainment around, but there were a lot of rabbis, a lot of rabbis teaching stuff. But why was it that they travel miles around the edge of the Lake of Galilee just to sit and listen to him?
Well, after the first occasion of its type, they came back because he supplied lunch for 5,000 of them. No, I'm sure he was.
Come on.
No. I mean, I'm
That's
sure.
a very
I'm
thin
sure.
response, Adrian.
I'm sure his style was very good, but I don't quite. I mean, do you think he chose places to stand where he had a sort of uprising of the land behind
There
him?
must
So
be.
the
I mean, we don't know these things,
no.
or how much of it was like in the film Life of Brian, where the people at the back hear something completely different.
Yes.
Did he say, "Blessed are the cheesemakers"?
That's
that
right,
type
yeah.
of thing. But I just think there's something spellbinding.
There is something
that-
spellbinding about people who say things that shock, but which Jesus did continually to people, and something about people who tell stories well, which is
Yeah.
very engaging.
Yeah.
And if, as the stories suggest, miracles happened, well, we weren't there, so we don't know. But if they did, then there would be people there, as people are now when they go to see extraordinary events. And
Yeah.
if they were going to see something really dramatic happen, I suppose, I don't know.
I suppose that's true. But, I mean, you say if they happened, but we do know that the biggie at the end, the raising of Lazarus, was the final straw for the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. I mean, it says quite clearly at that point they thought, that's it, that's enough. And it, I don't have any reason to doubt that at that point they thought, we've got to bring an end to this. So I'm sure there were the miracles. But good storytelling and good engagement with people still has to be a thing to admire and almost revere. But then I think of some of the fake news and the storytelling that is based on lies, and that also seems to have quite a charismatic effect on people who've decided it's the truth,
There's still,
as we can see in America at the moment.
know.
So
there's still in the church, I think, a dulling down of an almost automatic dulling down of things that might take you off the path.
yes, and I think that's what I meant about the tick box.
Yeah, I find it really difficult. I mean, I remember as a 16-year-old, I was very keen on Beyond the Fringe, which, for those who weren't alive then, which is getting more and more, it was a stage show, a comedy show, and one of the things on it was this wonderful fake sermon by Alan Bennett, which I just thought was wonderful, and I still do. And I went to the vicar of my church, and I said, "You know the entertainment that's coming up. I thought I would do this piece by Alan Bennett, and I would learn it and then recite." And he said, "Oh, he was a nice man, actually, I have to say, but he said, 'Oh, let me look at it.' And then he came back and he said, 'I'm afraid I think this is scripture you're talking about.' And it begins with a piece of scripture, and I think it's not respectful to laugh about those things." Well, I mean, as I lurch forward into nearly the 45th year of my taking the mickey out of the church, I don't seem to have taken that terribly seriously. But I think
well, no.
I think it was and is a shame when a sort of creeping caution prevents. I also remember. Do you remember once when some people were asked to comment on the stuff for a place we worked at, Scargill, and they wanted to cut out the idea that the Holy Spirit was ingenious, because ingenuity suggested cunning, and I thought you lose so much if you take away a bit of flavour, like with the rabbi. If you take a bit of flavour away, you've got no flavour left.
Well, that's very
So-
important. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Jesus said it, didn't he? He said, salt, you need to be salt. You
Yeah.
need to not just. I think the danger with that is it's being, well, salt preserves things. So you want to keep things nice, packeted away in a nice dark place with lots of salt so that it preserves it. And that keeps it its shape, keeps it its, instead of thinking what is the flavour and where do I find that flavour of Jesus' teaching. And I didn't find that. I went to a Catholic junior school. It certainly was no flavour in the Christian teaching, I have to say. It was Jesus was some other person who wafted around,
Yeah.
seeming to be completely disconnected with any real life. I don't blame them at all. I mean, and it was probably my perception, but flavour, yeah.
I don't know. The whole storytelling thing, I mean, according to the Bible, Jesus only ever told stories other than in certain circumstances.
Well, and talking to his friends.
And talking to his friends.
I mean, if he only told stories to them
Well, to
while
his
he was
friends.
eating fish, I should think it was very
his
annoying.
friends, he said things they didn't understand anyway. So he,
No, I think he probably said some other things that are not recorded.
yeah,
Adrian.
of course he did. Yeah,
Pass the
but
salt.
but the stories, it still happens that someone says, "What is the truth about this? Tell me the truth about this," and the truth is then presented in a sentence. Whereas with Jesus, someone would say, "Who is my brother?" And he'd say,
Who is my neighbour, yeah.
"Let me tell you a story.
Yeah.
Who's my neighbour?"
Yeah.
So by the end of the story, people are having to think for themselves and own the conclusions that they come to
Yeah.
as a result.
Yeah,
And stories can do that.
yeah.
And they
Yeah.
can involve murder
And
and
good
life
teaching
and whatever.
of
you know.
anything can do it.
Yes,
You know,
they can, yeah.
people who are wonderful maths teachers bring maths to life. I can think of brilliant history teachers, brilliant French teachers, you know, people who bring it to life, and I can think of people who kill it dead.
Yeah.
And but then maybe we were just peculiar children, Adrian. I mean, that is the other side of it. It would be interesting to hear, because I think some people would say, but that's what I loved, was just the factual, calm teaching that I could write down and absorb
Yeah.
and move on from. I don't think you and I were quite like that.
I would like to, before we must stop soon, I'd like to say to one recent correspondent, in answer to a question, yes, I do still enjoy whiskey. Thank you very much. I just thought I'd mention that. Anyway, if you've got
That's
any,
really
if
sneaky
you've got any
class.
bizarre or interesting or amusing stories about your teachers, we'd love to hear them.
Okay, we'll speak to you next week.
Yeah.